Another week goes by with more speculation of who could be the next head coach for the Silver and Black. We'll talk about that plus a whole lot more coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, Monday, December 4th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. Of course, as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you. We appreciate you. And my man Ari does a great job each and every day making sure we're up on YouTube. We're looking good. We're sounding good. We're doing what we're supposed to do, and the show's grown in a major way. So shout out to Ari, and of course, Raider Nation, shout out to you. Coming up on the show today, coming up in segment number 3, as a matter of fact, calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. A lot of calls, a lot of texts about a variety of different subjects, so we'll get as many in as possible coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, going to talk about what the Raiders' off-season priorities need to be if the coaching is where it's at. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll talk about it coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, kind of news and notes, whatever I gathered over the weekend as the Raiders were on a bye. They're sitting there at 5-7, last place in the AFC West as it stands right now, but they're coming off a bye week. They have 5 games left to go. We'll get right to that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Off top, let's go ahead and just jump into one of the biggest subjects I've been seeing a lot on social media, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and that's really about where the Raiders could be leaning as far as their next head coach goes. And there's a lot of speculation out there, and I want to use that S word in all caps. So if I'm texting it to you or tweeting it at you, I'm screaming at you. There is a lot of speculation going on right now when it comes to the Raiders and their head coaching position. Right now, Antonio Pierce has 5 games to prove what he could do with this team. And if he's willing to be, or not willing to be, but is worth to be the guy moving forward, right? I mean, that's what the task at hand is for him. He's got 5 games to prove that he could be that guy moving forward. He could lead this team and lead this team to victory and put them in positions to win games, whether the offensive coordinator is the same guy, whether the quarterback's the same guy, whatever the case may be. Antonio Pierce has 5 games to prove what he could do. So it's kind of, I don't want to say reckless, but it's a little out of control that there's so many names being thrown out there. And again, they're just really being thrown out there when it comes to who could be the next guy and what Mark Davis wants to do. When it's all said and done, none of that is confirmed right now, right? I mean, I talked about last week or the week before, David Shaw, when Vinny Bonsignore put that out there that he has interest. Well, he does. Like, I know he has interest in the job. There's a lot of people that have interest in the Raiders job. Hell, Antonio Pierce has interest in the Raiders job moving forward, right? But that's not saying that Mark Davis has interest in him or Mark Davis has interest in this guy or that guy or the other. There's a lot of guys throwing stuff out there right now. Again, a lot of it I'm seeing on social media that's almost confirming what the Raiders want to do. I mean, names that are floating around and, I mean, are really being talked about heavily. John Gruden, David Shaw, Rich Bisaccia, that name is out there again. Look, I get what happened when he was the interim coach back in 2021 when he took the Raiders to the playoffs. He did a hell of a job, and I get it that the team wanted him to stay on. But Rich Bisaccia is not a guy that people are talking about as far as a potential head coach of the Silver and Black. Like, Mark Davis is not saying, you know what, I messed up in 2021. Maybe I'll go back to the guy who helped us get to the playoffs. That's not the conversation. Like, I know for a fact that that's not the conversation, and I'm really surprised that that's being thrown out there. But at the same time, at the end of the day, you could throw just about any name out there, and then when they don't get the job, it's like, well, they went a different direction. So I just want to caution you. Again, I'm not here to slander anyone. I'm not here to talk about anybody's reporting skills or what they believe that they're hearing, this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, none of these names that are being rolled out are really serious, serious people or seriously like in play for the Raiders head coaching position. Yeah, Mark Davis is talking to people right now. I also know that. I also know that Mark Davis is talking to people inside the organization, like players in that locker room, like the Devontaes, like the Maxes, like the Josh Jacobs. Like, he's really having those conversations with people that matter about, what direction this team should go moving forward, talking about different big-time decisions that this team could make moving forward. Like, I know that for a fact. But some of these names, I think it's very too early in the process to just all of a sudden go ahead and be throwing them out there like it's what's happening, especially when there's 5 games left to go for Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce has an opportunity to get this job. That's something that I do know as well. Not saying he's going to get the job, but I do know he has an opportunity. Whereas when 2021 was going on and Rich Bisaccia was the interim coach, I never thought that he had the opportunity to really actually get the full-time promotion to be the head coach. Now, just because I didn't think it doesn't mean that it wasn't under consideration. I just never thought that he had a chance to do that. I know for a fact that Antonio Pierce has an opportunity to earn that job. But what he's got to do is he's obviously got to show that he could be that guy, not only for the short term, not only for the interim, but for the long term. And some of the areas where he needs to improve, in my opinion, not from Mark Davis, just from me, in-game decisions, it's got to get better. When to or when not to go for it on 4th down, it's got to get better. Got to put the team consistently in position to win games. Show that he could be the CEO of the team. I mean, you already see that the team is running through walls for him. Every one of the guys in the locker room, they're going to give maximum effort when they're playing for Antonio Pierce, which is something that you want to make sure that you see. But it's, again, going back to the game time decisions or game decisions, 4th down, go for it, don't go for it, and just always putting the team in the best position to win games. Those are the chess match moves that he's got to continue to improve on. Again, he's only got a handful of games under his belt, as the head coach. As he said, he was just a linebackers coach a few weeks ago. Now, all of a sudden, he's the interim head coach of the Silver and Black. As a matter of fact, the Mountain West Championship game was played at Allegiant Stadium on Saturday. Boise State was going up against UNLV. Boise State won that game, but after the game or during the game, while Antonio Pierce was there in attendance, Paloma Villicana from Fox 5 Sports, she actually had a quick second to catch up with AP and just talk to him about being there at Allegiant for the Mountain West Championship, being around the community, and also what being the interim head coach of the Silver and Black means to him. Here it is. Check it out.
Raiders bye week, but you're here. Tell me how much you care about this community.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, obviously, the Raiders, this is a staple. Las Vegas is a sport we get here for our home games. But more importantly, what do you do for your fan base and probably future Raiders here that we're watching today? So I think it's always critical when you can tie everything in together. The state, the community is big for us.
Yeah. Barry Odom, Mountain West Coach of the Year, a finalist for National Coach of the Year. If you've kept your eye on him, what impresses you about Coach Odom?
Well, I just think what he stands for. You look at the gentleman that's obviously built a program that's struggled for the last few years. And to get the kids to buy in right away, that's very difficult to do. But when you have that foundation and structure and you create a culture, and one of that is a winning culture, that's something that's impressive, especially in a short time.
Yeah. Coach, this is the sports mecca of the world. What an opportunity you have to be in this city. How blessed do you feel to be on the sideline right now?
I know. I mean, you never take anything for granted. Just 5 weeks ago, I was a linebacker coach. Things happen quickly. You take it for what it's worth. But you kind of, I think at some point you have to reflect. And this was a good opportunity for me this week during the bye week to reflect on what's happened to me and our team and our organization over the last 4 weeks and be better.
So, again, that was Antonio Pierce talking to Paloma Villicana from Fox 5 Sports on Saturday at the Mountain West Championship game at Allegiant Stadium. So that's just out there. I just want to throw it and just be cautious, especially when it's a bye week and there's no football activities to talk about. All of a sudden, there's a lot of different reports that start really running wild that all are not 100% true. Now, there's also reports out there about former GM Dave Ziegler, what he wanted, what he didn't want. Did he want C.J. Stroud? Did Josh McDaniels say no, this, that, and the other? And, again, I don't know what's 100% accurate, what's not, but I did send a text message to Dave Ziegler. I sent a message myself. So all I can report on is what I've done. And I sent the message to him and said, hey, I know it doesn't matter at this point, but I'm checking on I just want to check in on the Jimmy G situation, CJ situation. There's reports out there that you wanted CJ and Josh wanted Jimmy G or others. And then I also even told him, I said, the funny thing is when I was in Kansas City talking to C.J. Stroud before the draft, it felt like he was going to be a Raider. Like he sounded very confident in wanting to be a Raider. So I just asked Dave Ziegler his thoughts on that and told him, hey, it doesn't matter if you want to answer or you don't, but I'm just asking that question. So he responded in a text and said, ultimately, we came to an agreement on everything that we did. I'm sure each one of us was more in favor for some over others. That was from Dave Ziegler, straight up. So, again, that doesn't mean that he didn't want C.J. Stroud. That didn't mean that him and Josh McDaniels didn't have disagreements, but it also meant that ultimately they all came to an agreement on what they were going to do with the team moving forward. So it's really hard in December to say, yeah, well, that was that guy's fault. That was that guy's fault. That was that guy's fault. And this was what I would have done if you ultimately came to an agreement. If you didn't come to an agreement, then you didn't come to an agreement. And again, that's just based off of what he relayed to me by way of text message. And again, I can only report on what I can report on. And that was the correspondence I had with former GM Dave Ziegler. And at the end of the day, honestly, none of it matters anyway, because the Texans got CJ Stroud. The Raiders decided to go and sign Jimmy G. Bryce Young went to the Carolina Panthers. Like, all the decisions that are being thrown out there, all the reports about Ziegler this, Ziegler that, none of it matters. Because it's all said and done. McDaniels is gone and Ziegler is gone. So what the Raiders have to do is do their best moving forward instead of continuously looking back. But I know there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of questions about what's been going on with the team, and a lot of people have been asking me. And again, I can't report on someone else's reporting because I don't know who they're talking to. All I can tell you about is who I talk to. And I just threw that out there for you. That's facts. That's not something that I think. That's not something I heard. That's something that I was, in response with former GM Dave Ziegler about, and that is that. Coming up in segment number 2, Raider offseason priorities. What should they do as far as the roster? If the coaching's in place, the GM's in place, what about the roster? Is it in place? Can it compete moving forward? We'll get to that in segment number 2 after I tell you about one of the title sponsors of today's show, which is BetterHelp. And the one thing about life, it does not come with a playbook. It does not come with an instruction manual. You cannot pull it up on YouTube and say, okay, this is what I'm going to follow, and this is how I'm going to do things. You just don't know. There's a twist and turn around every corner. A lot of them you never see coming, and even the ones you do see coming are very hard to navigate through. So sometimes you just need a little bit of help. And again, we all at times need help, and we all at times come up with these decisions that we have to make that are very tough. Some are a little bit easier than others. Maybe some are just like about their career, or, hey, maybe I'm going to do this. I'm going to change careers, or I'm going to take this job promotion, or I'm going to change jobs. And that's a little bit easier than like a life or death type situation. But again, the twists and turns of life come to you in many, many different directions, and especially around the holiday time. Sometimes you can get a little bit of depression or sadness in your life based off what's going on in and around your life. And it's really hard to navigate through. So if you've ever thought about therapy, then you should give BetterHelp a chance. BetterHelp is really good. BetterHelp is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. In the season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about Raiders offseason roster priorities. I started to kind of get the ball rolling on this subject on Friday on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness, my radio show, just because I heard a conversation about the Raiders really can't compete in the AFC as they're currently built. And I started thinking about the team, started thinking about the defense, and thought, no, I think that they're in a pretty good position. They just need to work out a few little kinks. So I kind of was going through the roster, looking at the makeup of it, looking at the defense, what they've been able to do, looking at the offense, all the weapons that they have. Obviously, they haven't lived up to the billing, but if the coaching is right, and I'm not saying that's Antonio Pierce, I'm saying that's whoever they decide needs to be the guy that leads the Raiders moving forward. If everyone agrees, like, oh man, that's a great hire, that's a great coach right there, great staff that they have, man, this staff is in place, everything is good. What is the roster priorities? Like the guys that are actually on the field, what should those priorities be in the offseason? So I came up with 4 of them, and I think that they're pretty self-explanatory, but I think that those got to be the priorities. And when the Raiders could figure these out, they'll be in a much better position regardless of who the coach is, whether it's AP or other. And the first and foremost has got to be Aiden O'Connell, right? Is he or is he not the guy, right? If he's the guy, then the Raiders need to then good. The Raiders need to identify how to build around him. What is it going to take to get the most out of Aiden O'Connell? What does he do really well, this, that, and the other, if they decide that he's the guy? Obviously, they have 5 more games to make that decision. Some will say that 5 more games is not enough. I'll say that that's the position that they're in. They don't really have time to say, well, we'll give them another year to see what's up. They don't really have that time. They've got to come up with that decision quick, fast, and hurry. So they got 5 more games. starting with the Vikings on Sunday, Week 14 action. So if he isn't the guy, then the Raiders need to identify who is the guy and do what you have to do to go get him. It's been too long that the Raiders have just been kind of going in, their wheels are spinning in mud and it's not going anywhere, and saying, well, if you do this or if you do that, if you give this guy a big-time wide receiver, if you give this guy a defense, if you give this guy a strong run game, then he'll be better. You've got to decide, and when I say you, I mean the Raiders, have to decide if Aiden O'Connell's not your guy, who is it, and go get him. And no more, well, it's going to cost too much draft capital, or no, don't want to trade with this guy. You've got to just go do it, right? And I've been one that's very much against giving up trade capital to move up the draft board to go get a guy like, oh, it's too much draft. You don't want to. No, forget that. Forget that. You've got to be aggressive. If you're going to compete with Mahomes, you're going to compete with Herbert. You're going to compete with Wilson. And, oh, by the way, that's just the AFC West. You're going to compete with the rest of the great quarterbacks in the AFC conference in general. You want to give your team a chance. You want to be able to go out there and compete to win, game in and game out, not have the worst quarterback in the division, game in and game out. You've got to go out there and identify who your guy is and just go get him. That's got to be priority number one. Do what it takes to get your guy under center. If you feel like that's a trade for a veteran, I know that I've heard Justin Fields as a possibility, and I like his athletic ability. I don't think he's a really good pocket quarterback. I think that he's got a lot of work to do, so there's a lot of questions around him. But if you feel like you've got to make a trade with a team that's got the quarterback on their roster and you can go get him, fine, go do it. If not, if you need to dip into the draft, do what it takes to go get that guy. That's got to be priority number one for the Raiders this offseason. Go get your guy if you don't already have him on the roster. Number two, the offensive line has to be upgraded. Everything from the center to the right tackle is in question, right? Colton Miller is steady. I like Dylan Parham at left guard, but I say that kind of cautiously because he might be better at center. But the Raiders need to address the offensive line in a major way. If there's one thing I know Dave Ziegler and company didn't do in the offseason, which I would think was a mistake, was not upgrade the offensive line, right? Jermaine Illuminor is a good swing tackle, I think. He's good in a pinch. I don't think he's a good, consistent guy. Thayer Munford, I know they have high hopes for him. He has moments where he's really good at that right tackle spot, and then there's moments where it's like, he's not so good. Van Roten, I know Pro Football Focus is giving him some pretty good grades, but he's just to me, right? And Andre James, to me. Right, I think that they really need to address that offensive line for the sake of the run game, the passing game, everything. That offensive line has got to be upgraded in a major way. Another big-time priority number two in this upcoming offseason. Then, on the defensive side of things, bring in a playmaker defensively, right? Marcus Peters was brought in to be a guy that can go and attack the ball and take the ball back, and turnovers was a big priority this offseason. And he did get one interception, and he took it to the house, and that's awesome. He's also not on the roster anymore. Right? He also did not give effort when it came to tackling. He was out there just basically collecting a check. What they need to do, they need to address somebody who could be a ball hawking DB or an established bookend edge rusher that could be across from Max Crosby. Like, they've got to have another playmaker defensively that's not named Max Crosby, that's not wearing 98. Somebody. I know Tyree Wilson was drafted number 7 overall to be that guy. He's got to figure it out, right? Because he clearly has not figured it out. But they've got to have somebody who is a threat defensively, somebody that opposing offenses say, you know what, got to stay away from 98, but definitely got to keep the ball away from so-and-so as well. I don't know who that is, right? If you go in and get that guy in the draft, go get him, right? But you've got to find a guy. They went and drafted Jacorian Bennett in the 4th round. They didn't address the cornerback position until the 4th round. That was a conversation that a lot of us had here on the podcast throughout the course of the time leading up to the draft. Do you go get a big-time corner, a guy that can make plays on the ball, or do you go and get a defensive lineman? They went and got a defensive lineman, and, well, he hasn't panned out. He came in with injuries, so obviously there's a lot of work to do. Who knows if he's going to pan out or not? I like Tyree Wilson when he was drafted, but he's been coming along very slowly. So as far as I'm concerned, this year has been a redshirt year. In the offseasons when it's really going to see who he's going to be. We all know that they need to have a dominant defensive tackle. We all know the Jalen Carter conversation, that ship sailed a long time ago, right? So I just think somebody defensively who can be a dominant player, whether it's a guy who makes a play on the ball consistently, like a DB or a safety or whatever the case may be, someone who's got a knack for going and making plays, or somebody who can be a real deal threat to complement Max Crosby. Not a guy that we all hope develops into that guy, but a guy who is that guy. That's what I think that they need to do with the defensive side of things. And then finally, going back to the offensive side of things, Josh Jacobs is only on a 1-year deal, right? So are you bringing him back? Are you giving him a multi-year deal? Are you going to hit him with the franchise again and go through that again? Do you have a running back that could replace him on the roster? Right? I haven't seen much from Zamir White, but then again, we haven't seen much from Zamir White because Josh Jacobs doesn't come off the field. And I don't want Josh Jacobs to go anywhere. I want him to be a Raider for life if possible. We all know how the NFL is. It stands for not for long for a reason. But are the Raiders going to be willing to pay him the money that he wants for a couple more years of his services is going to be the big question, right? We all know what he brings to the table. We all know what he means for this Raiders offense, and we know how much the run game is needed. So what are you going to do with Josh Jacobs moving forward? So I think those are the 4 biggest offseason roster priorities. Again, that has nothing to do with coaching, has nothing to do with the front office, just players on the field. Aiden O'Connell, is he or isn't he the guy? Upgrade the offensive line, bring in a playmaker or 2 defensively, and what to do with Josh Jacobs. Those are my 4 offseason roster priorities. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts. What's on your mind? 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We'll get to that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. What is Gametime? Well, if you're trying to buy tickets to something, maybe you're trying to go to this game coming up, Week 14 action, the Raiders versus the Vikings at Allegiant Stadium, and you want to get tickets, but you're not sure how many you need, and you're going to probably find out on Saturday. That means you're going to get last-minute tickets. Don't worry. Gametime has everything that you need that can get you those last-minute tickets for everything, not just football games, not just sporting events, but comedy shows. You can go to concerts, any kind of event near you. Gametime has got the hookup for you. They're the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the events in your area. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices. You can even see the seats. When you go to buy them, you can get the views from your seat, and they're at the best prices guaranteed. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find the last-minute seats. With zone deals, you pick the section, and Gametime picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. What do you need to do that? Well, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a text from Assassin's Ghost. He says, "Hey, Q, the Assassin Ghost here. I agree with most of your grades, except AP. Grades should be a C for him because he's a rookie coach, so he's going to make mistakes. But the way he has us competing is amazing and has the whole nation feeling different. As you said, dark cloud has been lifted. Also, Hondo asked him on Monday presser about the challenges, and AP said he has a guy telling him when to throw the flag. So maybe the guy he appointed is the wrong choice." That's from Assassin's Ghost. Thanks so much for the text. And, first of all, starting with the challenges, every team has a guy upstairs that's looking at the replays of all the plays and saying, yeah, go, don't go. But at the same time, he's got to make that split decision. And sometimes he doesn't have time for the guy upstairs to say, yeah, go ahead and do it or don't do it. I think that he needs to have a guy that specifically just does that and kind of is maybe almost the analytics guy. Like, okay, this is what the analytics say to do. Doesn't mean that you have to do it, but this is what the analytics say to do. Because you could tell a few Gametime decisions he hasn't made the right ones. And again, like he threw the challenge flag on a turnover. You can't challenge that because turnovers are automatically reviewed. So that's just something he's got to know. And he said he's going to learn from that, and I agree. He's going to have growing pains. He said that from day one. I've been rocking with him on that as well. I just don't want to say that, well, okay, he's a new guy, so let's grade him on a curve. That's why I gave him a C- because I want to give him a equal playing field just like everybody else. You're on the same playing field. You're an NFL head coach, right? So you're going to be held to the same standards as everybody else. Again, it kind of is what it is. It's the nature of the beast. And if you're trying to earn that full-time position, you got to show that you can handle that full-time position. But I understand what you're saying as far as the grades, and I think that a lot of Raider Nation, including myself, would be fine with AP getting the full-time job. I really would. I think he could do a really good job moving forward. I don't know if the success would be immediately, but the one thing I do know is that you would never see a lack of effort from those players. And if you did see a lack of effort, similar to Marcus Peters, you wouldn't see him for long, as far as I'm concerned. I think the dude is a really good leader, and I feel like that this team needs a guy that's a leader, very Dan Campbell-like what's going on in Detroit, and you see how well they're playing now. He brought in that leadership, set the standard of how they were going to play, and the rest of the team, they rolled with that. And I think that the Raiders could do something very similar. Thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Green Eyed Raider. Green Eyed Raider is 81. He's calling to talk about a potential quarterback trade that the Raiders could make and explains why, and wants to get my thoughts on it, plus yours. Here he is, Green Eyes Raiders, 81.
What up, Q? This is Green Eyes 81, a longtime Raider fan. Just found you guys this season. Appreciate everything that you do. As a Raiders fan, we've had a long history of bad seasons. So I'm always going to watch, I'm always going to root, but I start looking towards the next season, especially at this point in time. I'm loving AP. I'm loving the progress that the Raiders have made since, letting go of, McDaniels, whatever. I hope AP is there for our head coach next year. But my question to you is right now is, I've been watching and hearing things about Chicago Bears and the potential of their first round draft picks and all the quarterbacks that are coming, If the Bears do decide to go with another quarterback, my question to you is how do you feel about the Raiders potentially going after, obviously, the QB for the Bears right now? I mean, I think Fields is very coachable and does have some growing room, but he's obviously exactly what, O'Connell isn't, or O'Donnell, or I'm sorry, anyway, but yeah, he's obviously what he isn't. He's a mobile quarterback and can make some really great moves when he needs to. And I think he could be a very good fit for the Raiders for the next season. But that's if we have a very good coach. I would love to see Fields under AP and see AP light that fire under Fields and take the Raiders to the next level next year. Just a question. I know it's super early, like I said. I'm always going to watch my Raiders, and I'm going to hope and root for them for the playoffs. Just wondering. Love what you do. Hope to hear of it. Bye.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. I appreciate it. And like I said earlier in the show, I'm not 100% sold on Justin Fields. I know what he could do on his feet. I get that. This dude could go over 1,000 yards every year on his feet. But, man, there's times where I watch him play, and I know he's in Chicago, and that's really not a very good place for quarterbacks to succeed. I just look at some of the decisions he makes. The other night, he fumbled the ball twice. Now, they found a way to win the game against Minnesota. That was that Monday Night Football game last week, as a matter of fact. But it just didn't look right. He has moments where he looks good, but he just doesn't look consistent. And I just don't know if that's the guy that you want to go battle with, right? I don't know if that's the guy that you think is going to go up against Mahomes and beat him a couple times a year. I don't know if that's the guy that you think is going to go up against Herbert and beat him a couple times a year. I don't know if that's the guy that you think is going to go up against Wilson and beat him a couple times a year. I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's so many quarterbacks, not only in the West, but in the AFC in general. Burrow, when healthy. Tua, obviously. Lamar Jackson, right? Josh Allen. I mean, the list goes on and on about the really good quarterbacks in the AFC conference. Can Justin Fields compete with the likes of those guys? I'm not 100% sure of that. I know it's easy to connect the dots because Champ Kelly's in the front office, and he's the interim GM right now. And, of course, he was in Chicago when they drafted Justin Fields, so he knows all about him. I just don't – I'm not 100% sold that Justin Fields is going to be that guy. But that's obviously something that we could talk about and continue to talk about throughout the course of really the offseason, because I do believe the Bears are going to make some decisions and end up not trading, but end up drafting a new quarterback. I think that whatever organization, whoever the head coach is, they're going to go and say, you know what, we're going to give this guy a fresh start somewhere, trade him off somewhere, and then also go draft our new quarterback of the future. I just think that Justin Fields' time in Chicago is coming to an end. Thank you for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Troy in the 305. He said, what's up, Q? What's up, Raider Nation? Troy here from the 305. Just have a suggestion for the coaching staff next season. I say we keep AP because he's a great leader and a player's coach. Keep him PG as his defense has been getting better, finally, and go after Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator if he doesn't get the Washington head coach position. We're only a quarterback and offensive line away from Super Bowl contention, and what better way to get at the Chiefs by hiring someone who's been there for years and knows that offense. Now they would have to hit on a quarterback and get better in free agency, but this team would be cooking with grease if we could pull that off. Let me know what you think. Raiders. That's Troy in the 305, and Bieniemy would not be a bad idea at all. That could be something, and I've thought this before myself, that with Antonio Pierce as the head coach, that could be something that they need is just a hot shot offensive coordinator, a guy who could dial it up, who gets creative with the play calling. I know Bo Hardegree is new at it, and he's only done it 4 games, just like Antonio Pierce has been the interim head coach for 4 games. I just haven't been super excited about the play calling, right? I feel like it's been very inconsistent. But again, I know it's all new. It's not like it's something he's been doing for years. So I kind of want to, just not give him a pass, but see how he continues to grow. But I have had those thoughts in my head that if they do keep Antonio Pierce, one of the caveats might be, okay, you've got to go out and get a hot shot offensive coordinator, somebody who could really push the needle and really get creative with the offensive play calling. Eric Bieniemy would be a hell of an option if it boils down to that. I just don't know what his expectations are. He's a guy who's been looked over many times for a head coaching position. He's in Washington right now as the offensive coordinator, but also the associate head coach. So he's basically Ron Rivera if Ron Rivera's not there. If he's gone for some reason, he'd be the head coach. So I don't know what kind of titles the Raiders could give him. Maybe that would satisfy him. Rich Bisaccia, when he was there as a special teams coach, he was the assistant head coach and kind of the associate head coach to John Gruden as well. And that's why when Gruden was let go, then Rich Bisaccia became the head coach. I mean, he's held that title before. Maybe that's something that Bieniemy would look for. I think he's a hell of a play caller, and that would probably get the most out of the offense that the Raiders have. But again, I don't know what his expectations are, what he would want moving forward. I think ultimately he wants to be a head coach in the NFL. Thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Cyrese from the Bay. He's calling to talk about Tyree Wilson and what he should be doing to try to improve and tell us why he sees a lot of Cleve Farrell in Tyree. Here he is, Cyrese in the Bay.
What up, Q? Cyrese from the Bay, man. Just calling to drop a comment about the Tyree Wilson situation. I enjoyed the show you were talking about, where you were talking to Rob Leonard, interviewing him. That was pretty insightful. Tyree Wilson's been kind of a lightning rod of a topic, obviously, because he's such a project, and I think it's a fact at this point that he's definitely not performing up to the expectations of a number 7 overall pick, and he's quite obviously a project. I don't think anybody can dispute that, but I want to say 100% agree with what you're saying, that he should be trying to do as much as he can to learn from Max Crosby. When you've got a 1 in a million type player, and Max Crosby is that, you can't expect people to be like him because he's that exceptional, he's that extreme. But if you got a 1 in a million type player in your locker room that you can learn from, you should be trying to take as much as you can from him. And it reminded me of Cleve Farrell. Now, I know these are two totally different players, but there's similarities between Cleve Farrell and Tyree Wilson. Both were really highly drafted players. Both really dominated in college just because they were bigger, stronger, faster. Cleve had that crazy quick get-off, and Tyree Wilson had that crazy length and power, but neither one of them had much in terms of pass rush moves, and they need it. But what always blew my mind about Cleve Farrell was Max Crosby was doing all he could to step up his game. Remember, he was going to that pass rush summit every year with Von Miller, and now he's like one of the leaders of that summit. But Cleve Farrell never showed up to that. It always blew my mind because I'm like, here's a guy who needs to learn pass rush moves at the NFL level because he obviously didn't have them, and he didn't seem to be doing what it took to develop them. So, and I just always kind of made me wonder, is this just an ego thing? Is this, I'm a first-round pick, and, why should I be doing what a fourth-round pick is doing? I don't know. But I think it's going to be really telling to see what Tyree Wilson does this offseason. He should be in Max Crosby's hip pocket, and he should get his butt over to that pass rush summit with Max Crosby to learn as much as he can from the best in the league. If he doesn't do that, something's wrong. So anyway, just a little food for thought on a Friday. Hope you have a good weekend, man. Tyrese, out.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And yeah, that's the most important thing for Tyree. I mentioned it earlier in the show. I mentioned it last week. He's got to be in Max's hip pocket, like you mentioned. He really does. This offseason is going to be huge for Tyree Wilson. I look at this year as kind of the redshirt year for him, and just take it with a grain of salt. Okay, it wasn't very good. Some people thought he was going to come out the blocks and he was going to be amazing. I kind of felt like they were going to slow play him. And it sucks to, have a guy that was drafted 7th overall and you have to slow play him. But that was the situation when it came to Tyrese. So I'm hoping that he finishes the season strong. He's got 5 more games to prove who he can be, what he could be in this NFL. But you're right. When the offseason comes, he needs to stay in Max's hip pocket. He really does. If you have an opportunity to learn from somebody that is as good as Max Crosby, that came from where Max Crosby was, remember, he wasn't a first-round pick. He was a guy drafted in the 4th round that was just trying to make the roster. He was a guy that broke his hand in preseason his rookie year and was like, I got to get back out there. Just tape it up. I got to get back out there. I might not make this roster. Tyree's got to act like he's not a first-round pick. He's got to act like he's a guy that's on the fringe and not making the roster. If he has that mentality, and I don't think he did when he arrived with the Raiders, because it's been said multiple times that he's been humbled, that tells me that all I need to know, that he kind of went into the locker room and came into the league with that attitude of, I'm Tyree Wilson. I've already arrived. I'm a first-round pick, so there's that. He's been humbled, so maybe that'll show sooner rather than later from the way he works, the way he tries to improve. But the most important thing for him is he's got to improve this offseason. This you could chalk it up to say he was injured. He was behind the 8 ball when he got into action this season. That's fine. You could use that as an excuse. But when you get into the offseason and you have all offseason to work and get better and grind, if you choose not to do it, that's 100% on you. It has nothing to do with your foot. That has everything to do with you. So a really good call, man. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. That's all I got time for on today's show. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have more news and notes. We don't actually get to speak with Coach Pierce until later on the week. They don't have any availability today, so we won't get there till I think maybe Wednesday at the earliest. But we'll do what we do, right? We navigate through the waters as it happens. I got a text from Raider Gonzo from the 505, a call from Raider Eddie in Denver. We'll get to on tomorrow's show as well. We'll have plenty of conversation on tomorrow's show as well, and we'll keep doing what we're doing as we prepare for Week 14 action. The Raiders hosting the Minnesota Vikings at Allegiant Stadium. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.